Hey, this is Gina Grad.
Hi, this is Teresa Strasser.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Errico.
Hey there, this is Casey Cavalier.
I'm Rocky Rose.
And you are listening to The Jay Franze Show.
Lucky you.
Welcome to The Jay Franze Show, a behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franze.
Well, hello and welcome to the show. I am Jay Franze, and this is your backstage pass to the entertainment industry. This week, we get to talk with a recording artist. We get to talk with Stephen DiJoseph. We'll talk to him about his struggle with Tourette's and how that fits into his career, how he started his musical journey, and we'll discuss his approach to marketing and the role that his label plays with that. Now, I've met a lot of talented musicians over the years, but let me tell you, Stephen is one of the most talented I have ever met. He has released 11 albums, and I can't wait to talk to him about that tonight. So if you would like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jayfranze.com. Now, let's get started. Stephen, my friend, how are you?
I'm good, Jay. How's it going tonight?
It is going good. It is going good, sir. I am excited to have you here. I know you've had an extensive career. You've released 11 albums, and I want to get into all of that. But before we do, can you just tell me about this chance encounter you had with a guy named Bruce?
That was incredible because, I've been to a lot of the major cities, music cities, and, in search of opportunities and deals and gigs, and L.A. and Nashville and New York. And I was in my hometown here, New Hope, Pennsylvania, and I walked into a pretty famous club known as John and Peters. And John and Peters has hosted such great artists as Leon Redbone, Springsteen was there. All artists of that caliber have in the past played there. It's still very live and very active with music. And I walked in, check out the band, talking to one of the musicians in the band. There was a gentleman standing there with them, and I greeted him and I shook hands, and I had a Tourette tick. And I said, "I'm sorry, I have Tourette's." He said, "So does my two kids."
And what are the chances of that, right?
Yeah, right. And then the other chance was like, I said, "What do you do?" He says, "I have a record label." And I said, "Well, I have music, so maybe we could talk about this." And so that's how we met. And then I just sort of disappeared. I left the club and wrote to him, and we got together, and that sort of launched the relationship and the opportunity to release music.
So when you wrote to him, though, I'm sure when you left that conversation that night, you didn't have a hope that you were just going to reach out to him and join a record label, right?
Well, I just thought, well, how strange. What I thought was, wow, I can't believe that this guy both has a record label and his two kids have Tourette's. What's the likelihood of that mix? So I wrote to him and I said, "Here's my material. Here's my links. Whatever comes of our meeting, I want to hear about your kids, So we got together and just sort of hit it off and became friends. As we talked, things developed, and I thought, well, this is going to be maybe an opportunity to release a specific collection of music that I've been wanting to have an opportunity to get to a larger audience. So that's what happened.
That's awesome. You yourself found out you had Tourette's at a young age, right?
Yeah, I was about 16 years old, and I'd had it for about 10 years. During that time, it was a formative period with the music and with your age, going to school and encounters with kids about, what are you doing? Why is that? Why are you doing that? And I was asking myself, why are you doing that? My parents were, why are you doing that? So that became a sort of a theme. What also became a theme was that at the same age of 6, when I saw the Beatles perform, as they say, on U.S. soil for the first time on the Ed Sullivan Show. At the same time, within a very short, maybe not even a week, Tourette's showed up, So all of a sudden I got these two energies, this like insatiable desire to be a musician and this insatiable desire to make movements and blur things. And I was like, what's going on? So, that was pretty supercharged at that age.
So what was the first sign of it?
noises and and things like that, ticking my head, moving around like that. Testing limits is an aspect of Tourette's. It's sort of it enters into the OCD part of it. And whatever that is, it may be a ritual, you could call it. Sometimes people, when you see them walking down the street, they step back 1 foot or they step forward, they go back. Sometimes you're going to avoid the cracks, and that's the OCD part. But all these things are, I guess I'll call them fodder for your vocabulary of movements that you begin to develop.
Now, do you battle the OCD piece of it as well?
My OCD is what I call of the Tourette's variety. It's not your typical like wash your hands 1,000 times. It's like it's repetitive stuff, noises. Like if I make a noise and it's a certain way and I want it to sound another way, then I'll sit. It's and that helps in music because you're working on the repeating thing, and I think that's why so many artists end up with have OCD or ADD. They can do multiple things at the same time. And it's like,
so, how do you manage it in order to perform?
Well, I have that's a double-edged sword. Sometimes it manages me because it's not something I can hide. And you're on stage and you're like doing these things, and people are like, "Oh, is he on acid?" Or what's going on? So eventually, a very good friend and PR guy helped me understand how he wanted me to look at it as a plus, as an advantage, and I began to think about. He began to point things out that I hadn't really thought about. So I began to not only just talk about it on stage, but tell stories about it. And eventually I created a piece of music that I called Tourette's. And it's basically Tourette's and jazz, because, you're improvising. What you're improvising with Tourette's is that, the reactions or how to do it. If you're a performer, you're on stage, you're thinking about how to land. Where am I going to go out of this tick, Well, that led to a bunch of interesting things. And so it kind of all has become, eventually all this led to making a film. And the film led to doing speaking. But building up to that film, it was how I managed it on stage, how I brought it out and began to interact with people about it openly, So that's changed a lot of things for me, It's really...
Well, you play multiple instruments, one of them being my favorite, and that's the acoustic Taylor. It's just beautiful instrument. Absolutely love that instrument.
Yes.
Just the way, especially, I'm an audio engineer, so especially coming from that point of view, the Taylor, it shines and cuts through every piece of music. It just always sounds beautiful.
Interesting. I love that, hearing that, yeah.
But what I notice with your performance is that it has a very rhythmic feel to it. And I didn't know if that was a way of managing the Tourette's and the tics.
It's more like it's maybe the bones of, for me, it's maybe like the bones of Tourette's. It's like not on the outside noticeable. Like the reason I play a certain way is because of Tourette's. But there's an influence, a definite influence for me, and it also, maybe it's what attracts me to a lot of different styles of music, or the way people approach their instrument. So there was a gentleman that passed away named Michael Hedges. He was from California, but he became very well known for his tapping and slapping and tunings and all that stuff. And primarily as a pianist, I was observing this guy, and I was saying, this is just amazing. And it just made me start to pick up the instrument, what I had. I didn't have a really good guitar at the time. I just started to try things, and write things. And then he passed away, and I and probably a bunch of other people around the globe, I just got into, I went and bought a good guitar. I bought the Taylor, and I started writing more and just trying things and these tunings. And it's almost like his spirit spread out and just landed in a bunch of artists' houses and guitars. So that's kind of where that really fired me up, like to pursue playing it a little more seriously and eventually making an album,
When you talk to people about Tourette's and OCD for the first time, do you find that they can relate to you in some way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my goal. So my Tourette's project is called A Synaptic Adventure, Tourette's and Beyond. And the reason it's Tourette's is because that's my platform in neurodiversity. That's where I am. Beyond, because it goes way beyond one condition, and it works in regions of the brain that, they're still not completely understanding it, but it's respected and understood that there's like a lot of conditions that enhance creativity. So how can I put this? So in relating, when I say, this is beyond, and I point out the fact that we all have these synaptic adventures. A synaptic adventure is really the way our brain makeup functions, as individuals, as maybe collectives, but this is more about individual experiences and the community of neurodiversity. And in fact, when I talk about it that way, people begin to go, "Oh, that's interesting," because they think I'm just going to talk about how difficult it is, to manage tics, and which it is. That's an aspect that I broach under the umbrella of neurodiversity and creativity. That's my platform in terms of talking about it, because I think there's a lot of people talking about the challenge of it, but I'm trying to make it universally understood that more of us have these aspects going on than are obvious. Like with certain of us, it's more obvious,
Right.
but others have it going on, and I think it helps people to recognize certain things.
The reason I ask, it's like Tourette's itself, it's something visual, something you can usually see or you can hear it. But OCD is something that you don't see. You don't see, the way the mind thinks. And what I'm curious about with it is, like, do you feel if you don't do certain things in a certain manner, that something bad will happen? I mean, what forces you to do it?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay. So the typical, I left the house. Did I leave the stove on?
Right.
That's a typical one. And there are times that I'll go back, but it's only if I'm halfway out the driveway.
Right.
But if I'm down the street, I'm not likely to turn around. I'm more likely to maybe pull over and review what I did, do recall and stuff like that. And so that I don't have the challenge of having to return all the time because I can't remember or because I think I did something I shouldn't have left out. This can slow me down. I do before I leave. I recheck things. Did I do that? Let me go check that. So I guess I've managed to keep it contained in. I haven't traveled 50 miles and I have to drive back or anything.
So you're talking about the Tourette's being physical tics, like a head movement or a sound that you make. Is there anything other than those type of tics?
Yeah. When people are close to me, like I feel like I have to touch them or move towards them, flip my arm. But when somebody doesn't know me, that's not so good. They're like, "Are you going to hit me or something?" No, I'm not. Sometimes I think about making T-shirts to explain things, ahead of time as you're walking down the street. In my film, I have a short film called A Synaptic Adventure, Tourette's and Beyond. And in it, I like to use a sense of humor about stuff. So one of the things that I have is this thing called, so coprolalia is the cursing of Tourette's, where people blurt, curses or stuff or they could blurt other things like, "House is on fire," or something,
Right.
things that are alarming. And I remember being in a Tourette's conference and a girl had "House is on fire" tic. And people are like, "How do you get that as a tic?" Well, it's the limit. It's testing the limits. I don't know exactly if it has to be those words or not, but like she had those words. But for me, my limit is like touching things or people, like not in a
Inappropriate.
I don't have that aspect, but I heard people that touch people in places they should not if they haven't been invited, but for me, it's testing the limits. How close can I get without breaking something or doing something or touching something? Or sometimes it's just connecting, like I say to my friend, can I hit your shoulder? Yeah, So if you've got that kind of friend who's like, or a spouse or a partner that you can be that way with, it's kind of helps, to deal with the anxiousness, but there's other ways to deal with that.
You found out that you had it at a fairly young age. How was that with your family?
Not so good. It was pretty like, what the hell are you? It was, I had an older brother that was always teasing, and my parents loved me for sure, but it was hard for them to comprehend. I mean, the doctor was like, "Oh, it's childhood behavior issues," and he gave me something that turned out to be a placebo, and is it gonna? Nothing stopped it, It's just.
Right.
So, what helped me was music, digging into something that I just absolutely loved without any prompting. It was just like, saw the Beatles. I literally was like, I saw them on television. I jumped out of the chair and I said, I want to do that. My parents are like, what? What do you want to do? What does it mean? So from that moment on, I was like, I want to play music. I want to play music. And it was like, and it hasn't stopped any, and that's many years ago. So I was on to something there,
Well, let's get into that, but one more thing just to close this out. I mean, I asked you about your family. You're from the northeast-ish area.
That's right, Philadelphia.
Yeah, so am I. From Boston, not from Philadelphia, from the northeast.
Okay.
What nationality are you?
Italian.
So am I. So the reason I'm asking you the question is, I know my family in the area that I grew up would pick on people all the time in a playful way. And, that's just what we did. Did you find that with your family or friends?
Let's see. How can I put that? Yeah, sure. Hey, what are you doing? Yo, Stevie, what are you doing? Or I stopped that. You don't need to do that, or that kind of stuff, chiding a little bit. And I know that other families, like I would go to a friend's house and they would be like, I would tell them, my parents said, they would go, wow, they're so intense, or no, it's not intense, it's just them,
Well, I noticed it. I mean, even with my kids, I don't live in the Northeast any longer. I live down in the Cincinnati area. I've worked in Nashville for the past 20, 30 years. But my kids now one of them is in middle school. And, man, they pick on each other like nobody's business these days.
Oh, my God, yeah.
In a different way. So it's not the Northeast style
not
of
necessarily right.
But let's get back to your music. So you also started music at a fairly young age, and you can play multiple instruments, and your music has a wide range of genres. So plenty of things to discuss here. Let's start with the music at a young age. What was the first instrument you picked up, and how did that journey start for you?
Well, the first thing I started doing was playing, taking some drum lessons in school. On a rubber pad. It was a rubber pad with the sticks, and we'd hold the stick. This is the proper way to hold the sticks, the flamadiddles and trills, and that was fun. It gave me a sort of rudimentary rhythmic thing, and but I saw people playing organ, and I wanted to play the organ. So that's kind of, my parents got me a toy at around 7, or roughly around age of 7. And I just started writing songs and playing with it and driving them crazy. And eventually they got me lessons. So really, like, the keyboard was the first instrument I was really delved into, and still remains probably what I have developed many different directions on. The guitar came much later, like when I was, it was 22, I think. I got my father's old guitar. He played for a month and he gave it up, but my uncle had it. He gave it to me, and I just started to play, write some songs on it and fool around with it.
I laugh because I started with the same rubber mat. It was probably in elementary school. Like it was like a black
Yes.
circle with another black flat circle around it. But
Uh-huh.
I played that and wasn't good. And I also had an organ. My grandparents had an organ, so I tried playing that.
Uh-huh.
I took keyboards as my instrument all the way through college, but still can't play. I mean,
Wow.
I was never good. I watch you play, and it's like, okay, that's what I was supposed to do. But but my brain knows what it's supposed to do. My hands just don't cooperate.
The fingers aren't cooperating.
No, but man, I see you play even just the piano. It's amazing to me just how fast your fingers can move and the things that you can do, the chords that you play. So how long did it take for you to develop that?
I would say, I learned the organ first, and I got into, I got all the way into classical. I got to the learning Bach fugues and a few of those things. So I really kind of delved deep. I was starting to compose too, because the reason I got so deeply into the organ was that my heroes like Keith Emerson and Rick Wakeman and all those guys, and then the jazz. Well, the jazz came later, but I just, I got into the classical thing, and that set me on fire. And then really the biggest classical transformation was when I heard Beethoven stuff and I started learning that stuff. That was the biggest, all that really just, I went there because of progressive rock, but then I got into the classical, and I thought I was going to be, head to the concert stage as a pianist, but I was too much into composing as far as my teacher was concerned, that I wasn't going to just focus. I would be changing things all the time. I would, not to improve, but just because I think partly had to do with the Tourette's, it was hard for me. I couldn't get the sight reading. I could get reading down. I learned how to read and play that way, but sight reading was a harder game. So I started composing.
Well, I mean, sight reading is hard just in general. I mean, especially on an instrument like piano, because there's so many different things going on. Your feet are doing two different things. Your hands are doing different things. You're trying to turn the page on the sheet music. I mean, it's just too much going on for me.
Yeah, for me it was felt that way. Yeah, definitely. I always was marveled at my teachers, the various teachers that I had, and other players that could just set something down and go blah blah blah. It sounds like this. It sounds like, because all the instructions are there, and I was like, how am I ever gonna do that? But I could learn music, so I learned the classical stuff that way. I studied sections, and I just my approach was, of course, look for repeating patterns, and then try to look for the variations in each one. And it's sort of jazz approach, I guess.
That's funny you mention it like that. That's the reason why I got into engineering, because I have a love for music and I write songs. I do all those type of things, but I was never good enough to perform them. I played in rock bands throughout high school. Just, once I reached that point, I couldn't go any further.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be involved, so I went to college for engineering, in audio engineering. And so to me, learning those things was repetitive. It was patterns. It was mathematical. And I was like, this all makes perfect sense to me. So I was able to make a career out of that because I was able to make sense of it. And it's the same thing I did with music. Like you're talking about the piano, I could see the different octaves on the keyboard. I could put the patterns together. I could know where things are and what I'm supposed to be doing. But again, just being able to do it is a different story. So
right.
You mentioned the Beatles a couple times, and I've been listening to your music, and there's a couple songs in there where you can really feel a heavy Beatle influence. So can you talk about that influence for a minute?
Well, let's see. They flipped that switch in me. I was like, whew. It was so profound for me that I just felt that because they triggered me in that way, I was a sort of a foundation or something. But as time went on, I got into the classical stuff, and so I could hear the classical in their stuff. But it was McCartney said I never really studied classical. I just had an ear. And I began to appreciate their ability to hear things and then realize them was kind of where I ended up heading. Because I didn't want to get academic. I did for a while. I did some college, but I was more interested in just going and playing, and so that's what I ended up doing.
Well, they're also known for their harmonies. Do you feel like you've adopted some of that into your writing?
I think some of them, there's several songs that for me reflected that influence. One song is called Flying, and it's a it's an upbeat, silly love song.
I'm laughing because that's been my favorite off the album so far.
Oh, really? Yeah, I believe in that song, and I think it should be heard everywhere. It just has a very happy thing, and it's like, the guy's a hopeless romantic, but he's very happy about it, and that seems to be the extent of my love songs are that character. He's like diehard romantic, and yet things don't work out, but he's still like happy as all get out. It's so the Flying reflects for me that, like, the Beatles and Elvis Costello, and that kind of era. And there's a piece called Ride. Both of these are on the new album.
Yep.
And Ride has there's a middle part, like Ride That River is this one section that repeats over. It's like the chorus, somewhat a chorus. And that kind of came when I was doing that. It was like, I'm a bluebird, I'm a bluebird, I'm a bluebird, yeah, yeah, yeah. McCartney song from Wings. And maybe people don't even know that song, but it's worth going and finding it, Bluebird. But anyway, this section was reminding me of that, and I kind of went off, into the rest, developing the rest of the song. But I can't say I'm always thinking of the Beatles at all, but anymore it's just, that became, I guess, early on or at certain points,
Let's transition that into your specific writing process. So what is your writing process?
Well, it depends, because I say on stage, I have MGD, which is multiple genre disorder. So it really just depends. Am I doing classical? Am I doing arrangements of Celtic? Am I doing jazz? Am I doing part of a jam band, progressive rock, a classical piece? So I'm kind of ideal for a film, as a composer, but a nightmare for a record label, because each record is different. And each one could be, I could build a festival around all the different, different things. But so if I'm approaching an instrumental piece, I'm looking for threads, like you have classical forms, and whether it's a sonata or an etude, or you have these forms that bring themes and then variations and recapitulations. All this type of stuff comes into my instrumental stuff because it's more developed. It's influenced by classical. It's influenced by progressive rock. And then the pop stuff, of course, is going to be much more simplified. There's going to be the chorus and the bridge. But even in those realms, I've experimented. But still, I managed to stick with a form that's more or less popular,
When you go in the studio, do you play all the instruments yourself?
There are certain songs that I did that with, thanks to the keyboard, and drum productions and loops and things like that. Even in being able to play the percussion on a keyboard and stuff like that. So I utilized that approach, and I also utilized really excellent musicians in this region. So it really just depends. A lot of times what would happen for me is that I was anxious to do something and I couldn't get people, or I couldn't pay them. So I was like, screw it, I'm going to do it myself.
You're fighting a challenge with people in your area and getting them to commit to come in and perform with you. So what other challenges do you have?
This specific album that I did, the newest one called Songs, Dreams, Circumstance, for a long time I was thinking I want to get these songs out to more people. I think they're good, and I want them to be heard. And I don't know if that's going to be through advertising or just what kind of distribution or a label. So when Deko came along, that kind of answered a challenge, which was not just like sticking it. I like these outlets, DistroKid, CD Baby. It's good to have those things, but it's kind of like the difference you can have a road sign and it can be on Highway 1 through the Alabama woods, or it can be on 95 and like thousands of people see it. So, like when you believe in your work, you're an artist, whatever it is you create, whatever it is you do, and you feel that it hasn't reached its completion until you have people reacting to it. And that is certainly true for me, and it still will remain that way till I'm gone. And so when I put up a road sign, it was on like these back roads, and I was like, it's there, but who's seeing it? The challenge is getting it seen. I think that's always the challenge for an artist, because you got, 10,000 uploads a day on Spotify or whatever, I mean, it's all, you have to you use the internet and go beyond it at the same time. Yeah. So that's what I realized, and that's helped me.
So what have you found so far to be the best way that you've promoted your stuff? Are you on social media, or like you're doing traditional grassroots type stuff? What's been the best way for you?
The best way. I actually found, I put an album out about 10 years ago. It was a piano solo record that was for the holidays. And it was meant to be not just a holiday like Christmas, but winter music, I called it. I ended up moving quite a bit of it through my Facebook groups and connecting with people there. So I would say that was a great. And then at the same time as I was doing the Facebook, I was literally going to places, and I was setting up a listening booth with the album there, and I would stand there, and people would come up and they'd be like, "What's this?" And I was like, "Oh, this is a brand new album." Like I would put out a sign that say, praised by Wyndham Hill, whatever marketing aspects I could put up and to draw people's attention. So I sold that way. I sold by playing shows. So it was a very rounded experience of that. Yes, there's the internet, but I got out in front of people. I went and sold it at fairs. So it was a very successful solo release. I mean, I think it cost me maybe $500 to make it. And I probably made like about $3 or $4 grand that season. So that's a microcosmic success for an independent artist,
Well, that's a great success, right? So, I mean, you mentioned Facebook, and you have a fairly large following on Facebook, several thousands of people on there.
Yeah.
But that's leaps and bounds above some of your others. You got a respectable following on, say, Instagram or on Twitter, but you got a really large following on Facebook.
Yeah.
So what makes Facebook more successful for you than the others?
I really can't say I know. Part of my work is to understand how these analytics work and what reasons. I think for me, maybe it's demograph. My age as an artist. I would say that it seems that Facebook, I can talk to people. I think the key to all social media is that you show up and you talk to people. You respond to their comments. You have to talk. It's social. That's why it's called social. If you don't talk to them, then you're not being social. It's like if you just talk at them, you need to talk to people. You need to be approachable.
Absolutely. Over the years, like I said, you've been very successful. So what's been your most memorable moment?
My most memorable moment, I will say two. There's more than two. I'm just going to stick with two. One is that I have a very good friend who is very, very big in the European music world, like doing jams and jazz and all kinds of experimental music. And so he got an opportunity to bring a collection of musical artists from Philadelphia to Prague and perform in this huge festival. And that for me was pretty big. At the time I was like, I'm doing a piano concert in front of 1,000 people in this gorgeous amphitheater stage, and they're liking it. And it's like, this is awesome. That was like fantastic. So, and then the second one was that I worked on a project called my Synaptic Adventure film. That it ended up winning this documentary contest, and I won first place, and it was like that blew my mind because I was like, it was a 12-minute film about my experience of Tourette's and about I had a humorous approach to it. I did all the editing, most of the editing. I had people obviously helping me, but it was very quirky. And I thought, I'm just going to do it because I got some funding. And when it ended up winning, I was just like, wow, this is incredible. Then it went on to like about 4, 5, 6 other festivals, and that opened up speaking. So that's the other big moment for me.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, that's going to feel great when any of your work gets an award, but when you're not typically a filmmaker, and you put a film
Right.
together and you win an award, that's going to feel amazing. And that's got to open up other doors. What kind of doors has it opened up for you?
I met interesting people, that's for sure. That was thrilling in itself. And then just being around filmmakers was, how can I put this? There wasn't any competition. In other words, I've hung around musicians and I've hung around filmmakers, and filmmakers are by far more friendly to each other. The musicians seem to always be in competition. This isn't a blanket statement, but just in general, I mean, there's lots of opportunities for musicians, there's opportunities for filmmakers, but I guess filmmakers, for the most part, tend to work with other people, collaborate. They need the sound guy, they need the editor, they need the director, obviously indie people, like, I had a few people helping me that guide me, but so I had to work with people to get to that point where it was the same with records, but still, like, there's something different about the filmmaker interaction.
What do you hope people take away from your film?
There's more to neurodiverse conditions than the problems they create, the challenges, or there's more to a person who's standing on the street corner, ticking and screaming or whatever, because that's I remember as a kid seeing people, they were apparently homeless, but they had Tourette's, without a doubt, in my mind, that, and then people would just kind of shun them because they're blurting things out, But if you went up and talked to them, I talked to a guy one time as a kid. I was like 10. And I asked him, I said, why do you have Tourette's? He didn't know. He said, I don't know. He actually talked to me normally, but from a distance, he was like, it was all weird, It was like, God, it's scary, But then I asked him, do you have Tourette's? He said, I don't know. I said, does it make you feel weird? Or, he said, well, I'm just trying to live. That's all. And so that's the takeaway, is that, look deeper than the book cover.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Over such a long career, what kind of setbacks have you had?
There was one point where I went through what I would call you can call it depression, you can call it a dark night of the soul, if you will, or just a rites of passage. I like to think of it as all those things because it was. I went into this thing. I was taking medication for Tourette's and it messed me up. So I ended up very depressed and hard to get out of bed, and the things that got me out of bed, where I had gigs, I had to go and play, and that really helped me to carve a way to out of it for a while, and then I'd come back in. So that, but on the coming out the other end of that, opened up a lot of creativity, and I ended up making like 3 albums in 2 years. So
music really was a therapy for you.
Well, I think it depends on how you're able to process it, because I can't speak about it in any kind of a generalized form. I think all these kinds of things, I think that the tendency in a social way is to kind of homogenize all these experiences: depression, loneliness, suicide. It's like everybody has a story. And even though there's similarities, there has to be respect for an individual experience and a way in which to process that. there has to be some guideposts to help that individual taking into account their own story. Yeah, so that's what I learned.
Yeah. So what comes next for you?
I have this wonderful gig coming up April 4th that it's basically a record release show, and so the record label folks will be there. There'll be someone filming it. I'll have guests on stage with me at various points. I'll be experimenting with new approaches to the presentation. And
Well, that's a good point, too. Now that you got the record label involved, what are they doing for you? What is their role in this relationship?
well, they took this project of mine. They put it out as a CD and a digital release. It now streams on every streaming platform that exists. I'm like, I'm finding myself in Asia on. I think there's an Indian streaming. If I can remember, GAA. I want to say LI or NI. And I don't know how to pronounce it, but I was searching my name in the album title, and there it was in India. And then in Japan, I saw on the streaming site in Japan. So to see that's what they're doing, because they're working with the Warner Music Group, and they're working with Cargo Records in the UK. And so for me, they put me on a bigger map, a bigger portion of the world map. So, okay, how do I utilize this reality that I'm now over here and over there? And so, yeah, it's helped in so many ways. It's
very cool. Well, we do this thing here, sir, that we call Unsung Heroes, where we take a moment to shine the light on somebody who's worked behind the scenes or somebody who has supported you in some sort of way.
Yes.
Do you have anybody you would like to shine a little light on?
Yes. Beth Con Kennedy. She's been a partner in so many aspects of my projects. And she herself has a lot of experience in the past in Hollywood and working in a lot of these aspects of the entertainment industry. So she gave me a lot of feedback. I mentioned her, and there are a number of people that have helped me in tremendous ways. So it's hard to focus on one person, but I would say that she helped me with the film and has listened to a lot of my processes when I'm working on these things and given me feedback and helped develop tools that I needed and stuff like that. But there are a list of other people that have helped me. So I honor those people, even if I can't mention their names or whatever. There's not enough time. Because it's kind of like the Academy, right? I want to mention Academy Awards. So I also mentioned real quickly, Serge Nikolic was the fellow that helped me bring Tourette's out as what he called a superpower. So thank you, Serge.
A big thanks to Stephen for taking the time to share his stories with us. And as always, thank you for taking the time to hang with me here. I really do appreciate it. Please follow, share, and connect on all the socials. You know the drill. You could even tell a friend. I would appreciate that too. You can do all of this and find the links to everything mentioned over at jfranze.com/episode 60. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franze Show. Make sure you visit us at jfranze.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.